For those of you who may not understand this question, an operating manual is something that every business, and especially entrepreneurs, should create and keep up on. It is, for lack of a better way to put it, your business how to guide or instruction manual for others to refer to should you become incapacitated or unable to run and operate your business. Welcome to your Landlord Resource podcast. Many moons ago, when I started as a landlord, I was as green as it gets. I may have had my real estate license, but I lacked confidence and the hands-on experience needed when it came to dealing with tenants, leases, maintenance, and bookkeeping. After many failed attempts, fast forward to today, Kevin and I have doubled our doors and created an organized, professionally operated rental property business. Want to go from overwhelmed to confident? If you're an ambitious landlord or maybe one in the making, join us as we provide strategies and teach actionable steps to help you reach your goals and the lifestyle you desire, all while building a streamlined and profitable rental property business. This is your Landlord Resource podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Your Landlord Resource podcast. This is Stacy, and I'm here with Kevin today, and we are answering questions that have been sent in by our listeners.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions from people, and some are easier to answer and some not so much because there are so many different variables that this community of landlords is built upon. We have some just starting out with one rental property. We have some with 10 or 20 doors that they self-manage. Some manage properties in their hometown and some from afar, kind of like we do. Some specialize in certain class properties and deal with Section 8 situations. So when we answer questions, we try to do so completely and cover as many different scenarios as possible.
Yeah, which is why our podcasts are so long winded, and often we have to separate them into two-parters. Because our goal is to help self managing landlords learn as much as they can so that they can become more professional rental property owners. And so that when they're ready to step back and let someone else take over, they have the knowledge and the know how of what they want a property manager to handle on their behalf.
Exactly. So we have what, 5 questions we picked to answer today?
Yes. And many questions were submitted, and we chose these 5 to answer today. So keep sending in questions, and we'll consider them for our next Q&A in the coming months. Okay, so from Sharon, who's in California, she sent in a couple questions, and let's start with her first one. She asked, I had a no pets addendum in my lease, and then my tenant wanted to add an ESA. She provided all the necessary documentation. However, I'm unclear if I still include the no pets addendum in the lease in addition to the ESA addendum or remove them from the lease. All right, you guys, this is a common mistake. Pets and ESAs are completely different scenarios. Short answer, yes, you want to leave the no pet clause in there. Because if not, they can add a pet without consent because nowhere in the lease does it say that they cannot. Your no pet clause also applies to guests and visitors who have pets and want to bring them on the property. So even if you allow pets, you need to have a clause that states anyone visiting who has a pet must get permission to have that pet on your property. Why? Because you as the owner are responsible for anything that that pet does, like bite the neighbor's kid or attack another person's pet. This is also why you must require renter's insurance if you allow pets. That renter's insurance needs to cover you and the pet owner for such incidences. Remember, many property insurance policies that you have to protect your property do not cover pets. And if they do, many put limits on breeds and size that are covered. So whether it's your property insurance or the tenant's renter's insurance policy, somewhere pets you allow on the property need to be covered or you're leaving yourself wide open for a lawsuit. And real quick, if you don't require renter's insurance and you want to implement that policy, you can send your tenant an email giving them 60 days notice that they will have to provide proof of a renter's insurance policy by such and such date. If you'd like to include it, we recommend you using Toggle for your tenants. We have teamed up with Toggle, a division of Farmers Insurance that offers competitive pricing of renter's insurance for your tenants. Policies start as low as $5 a month, and each policy is completely customizable for your tenants. And what that means is if they're a collector, they can increase their coverage to cover all their collectible items. Or if they have an animal on the property, they can get extra liability coverage for that. Even if they own a home based business where clients may be coming to the home, there can be extra liability coverage specifically for that. Lots of options in a really good company. We will link a PDF that you can send along with your email to your tenants should you want to give them a leg up when finding a renter's insurance policy carrier.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Let me talk a little about ESAs, aka emotional support animals, not to be confused with service animals. Okay, one, many tenants will try to pass their pets off as ESAs, and most landlords assume they have to allow any and all ESAs, but not always. You have the right to discuss the need each pet brings to that tenant as an ESA with the health provider who signed the ESA certificate. So, if the health provider who authorized the emotional support animal certificate claims the tenant has anxiety, they only need one pet for that. If they have PTSD, they can have a different ESA for that. And if they have ADHD, they can have a third ESA for that. I'm telling you, the list has about 20 different conditions that tenants can claim they need an emotional support animal for. But you, as a landlord, have the right to question the medical professional who is granting these certificates because many of these providers are not personally involved with the tenant. Many tenants will go online and buy a certificate that comes from an actual medical professional when neither of them have ever even talked to each other. They just pay the fee, and within a few hours, the certificate is mailed to the tenant. They do this because landlords with a no pet policy have to allow an emotional support animal. They also will do this to avoid paying the required pet fees. And one more thing to note, a tenant cannot call you and tell you they already have the ESA, especially if you have a no pet policy. There is a process they have to go through before bringing the animal home, like vetting the pet and doing a background check on the ESA certificate provider, because, like I said earlier, you have the right to speak with them and ask the exact reason behind the approval and need for the ESA. If they say the patient needs 3 emotional support animals, you can inquire about the need each one of these animals has for the tenant. A couple more things. We love our pet policy for ESA verifications. Many times they have found that the certificates are fake or given under false pretenses. We did a podcast a few weeks ago where we interviewed Logan Miller, the CEO of our pet policy, and he had a lot of interesting things to say. We'll link it in the show notes. One last thing. There are companies out there that say they do ESA verifications and charge landlords a handsome fee, like $60 for each verification. Those companies only look to see if the medical professional is licensed, not if they have a relationship with the tenant, not to see if the tenant has a true medical condition and a need for this ESA, not if they are listed under the fake certificate list that is available to these pet screening companies to reference to. Our pet policy does do an extensive background check, so if you're using other companies, buyer beware. Many licensed therapists are making a killing by allowing certification companies to just rubber stamp their signature on ESA certificates. Quite disgusting, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that that violates the oath that these doctors take. And guess what? When our pet policy finds a medical professional who does this, they report him to the state medical board to get them involved. Not a good thing to chance, in my opinion, but like Kevin said, these are people that are making a killing, like tens of thousands of dollars per month selling these certificates. And it works because landlords are too afraid to challenge the tenants. But it's your right to do so. So go back and listen to that podcast. Logan gave a special offer to everyone who signs up with our pet policy. Okay, Sharon had a second question, and that kind of overlaps with another question that we received. So let me read it and answer a little bit and then address the other question as well. She says, I have one unit I personally manage. My tenant is a single mom. How do you balance running a business with rental rate increases and helping out a single mom? I make enough to cover the short term expenses with a profit, but I also want to plan for long term replacement of big ticket items like the HVAC system, which is old. The condo was built in the 80s. How much profit is safe to cover short term and long term costs? All right, let me address the cash reserves part first. For those of you who are not aware, cash reserves are basically you saving money from the profit earned each month to cover expenses such as vacancies, repairs and maintenance, and large capital expenses such as the HVAC Sharon mentioned, or maybe a roof or a fence for the yard. It's recommended, at minimum, you save 15% of your rental income for each property. You want to save until you have 6 months to 1 year's worth of all expenses, so, in case you have a situation where you have no income coming in, but still need to maintain the mortgage and property taxes, like from a fire or a flood or a pandemic. So, if your rent is $1,000, you want to be saving $150 a month until you have at least 6 months of total expenses set aside. And this takes quite a bit of time.
It's also one of the mistakes many investors make when evaluating a property. Many times you'll hear the rule of thumb being if you make $100 per door after mortgage, taxes, insurance, and general expenses, you're good. Not unless you account for reserves as well. You need to be able to pay for a water heater going out or an appliance that needs to be repaired. And let me tell you, these things cost way more than $100. If you aren't able to set these funds aside, you can lean on your personal savings or a HELOC, but we really don't want to recommend that. We did a podcast, episode 28, all about cash reserves. It's literally like a masterclass. So go back and give it a listen. We'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, cash reserves are tough. We've been there and we ended up setting aside 10 grand just to get us started because the profit that we were going to earn was going to be so little until we were able to get those rents up. And it was nice to have that cushion. It gave us peace of mind. All right, let me address the other part of Sharon's question before I read the next one. So, when it comes to dealing with a single mom and how much to increase her rent, you are trying to decide on how to balance kindness and financial awareness for a tenant and still make enough to feel secure. The good thing here is that because Sharon's condo is located in California, it's exempt from AB 1482 and the rent control restrictions on rent increases. As for raising the rent on a single mom, one, when it comes time for renewal, you can ask for proof of income because this one will show you that they still qualify to rent from you, and two shows you what their income is. I'm not saying she's not struggling. I was a single mom of 3 kids for several years, and I definitely had a budget that I had to stick to. But some women play the single mom card, and all the while, they're getting child support to supplement their income, which, by the way, they may or may not put down on their application, but it will show up on their income taxes, which you can legally ask to see. Which, in that case, you would be okay to ask for a little bit more rent. And learn to pay attention to the tenant a little too. If they're stating that they are having a hard time financially, but they're driving an expensive car or wearing expensive clothing, and on their social media, they're posting pictures of themselves out eating expensive meals or on a beautiful vacation, then maybe they're not hurting as bad as they say they are, and it's more of a poor financial management issue than an income issue. Where you absolutely need to be aware of your tenant situation and work with them when possible, you are also a business owner and need to ask yourself if you're financially in the position to support the tenant. Because by not raising rents or by giving discounts, that's exactly what you're doing, financially supporting the tenant. If you have ample reserves, personally or for your rentals, then go for it. If you do not, find an increase that you're comfortable with. Start with market rents for a similar size unit and amenities offered, and go from there.
I want to point out a few other variables to consider. Sometimes the answer depends on how much the rent is below market. If you are within $100 of market rent for the unit, you don't have much more to earn. If you are $500 under market, you should consider raising the rent. One thing that we do when we have a large increase is to tier the rent so it is not such a huge jump in rent all at once. So we will divide the amount of increase we want by three and do an increase quarterly or every third month. This is a good alternative to losing a good tenant when you know that increase will be hard for them to manage right at renewal. It gives them time to adjust their budget and plan for the increases as well. It also depends on how many units you own. If you have multiple rental properties and only one has a tenant that you want to help out financially, your other properties might have enough profit to allow for this to happen. Lastly, it depends on the condition of the property and how many amenities there are. If they are getting a lot of good stuff like washer and dryer on property, a pool, a workout room, and living in an updated unit, then maybe they need to find a home that costs a little less with less amenities. On the flip side, if they're living in an old, outdated unit, and if they move out, you will have quite an expense to bring it up to speed with updates, then that is certainly something to consider when doing increases.
Yeah, we have a tenant who has been with us for years. What, like 13 years now?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, his unit needs some serious love and attention. We have his rent about $200 under market, and he's on a month to month rental agreement. But we're letting it go for now because if we raise the rent and he moves out, we have at least $10,000 worth of work that we're going to have to do. Likely more before we can put it back out on the market for someone else to live there. We've done these updates in all the other units, and this is the only one that's left. Okay, the next question we had that is similar by way of discussing rent increases for those who may need a break comes from Alex in South Carolina. He asks, I have a duplex with an elderly man living in one unit. He just lost his wife and is on a fixed income. There's a young man living in the other unit. We raise rents annually to stay up with the market rate, but because the older gentleman just lost his wife and his income is now lower, we wanted to only raise his rent a little bit in a way to show some compassion and not add to the stress he's already experiencing from the grief of his loss. We would raise the rent of the young man significantly more for his same size unit. Is this okay, or does this violate fair housing for ageism? So, Alex, first of all, kudos to you for recognizing this elderly man needs a break and caring about him. All too often, we hear of landlords kicking these elderly tenants to the curb, and it's really heartbreaking. However, like I mentioned before, only give back if you can cover it financially. Where you absolutely have the right to raise rents, unless you are within the confines of rent control, we also feel that landlords have some level of responsibility to work with tenants who they know need a little bit of help. Again, only if you're in a financial position to do so, not if you aren't able to make your own expenses and put yourself in debt. As for ageism, that your other tenant might claim, you should be fine. Now, where the elderly are not specifically covered by HUD's fair housing laws, they do protect disabled persons, of which many elderly people qualify. So, side note, there are some states that protect elderly, but usually not pertaining to the amount of rent. So, check your state level landlord tenant laws to see if there's any issues. Now, I know off the top of my head, Ohio has a few counties that have protections for elderly tenants. But back to fair housing and the disabled. You must give a reasonable accommodation to the disabled if they ask for such items as grab bars in the bathroom, preferred parking in front of their unit at no charge, or something like altering the access to their unit so that they can enter and exit easier. There is nothing in HUD's fair housing for the disabled that pertains to rental discounts. And I point this out because you cannot use fair housing as a fallback plan should the young man on the other unit challenge you on it.
And quite frankly, if he doesn't like it, he can move out and go live somewhere else. And to be honest, I'm not sure how he would find out what the older man is paying for rent anyway. I mean, do tenants really walk around asking each other this stuff?
I don't know, maybe. I would hope that tenants would keep this information to themselves, but who knows? Bottom line is no, this is not ageism, Alex. Do what is best for you and for your tenant. All right, moving on to the next question that was submitted by Paul from New York. And he asks, You often talk about the importance of having an operating manual and criteria set up. Does each property have an operating manual and criteria, or can they be combined? Nice question, Paul, and we are happy to answer this in short form. For a more detailed answer, you can refer back to one of our most popular episodes, which was episode number 6, which was all about creating standard operating procedures for your business. We'll link it in the show notes. For those of you who may not understand this question, an operating manual is something that every business, and especially entrepreneurs, should create and keep up on. It is, for lack of a better way to put it, your business how to guide or instruction manual for others to refer to should you become incapacitated or unable to run and operate your business. It's your standard operating procedure that anyone can pick up and follow so your business will not suffer during your absence. It would cover what you do when collecting rent, handling a maintenance or repair request, placing or moving a tenant out, and how to handle every single step you take with all your dealings with the tenants and the administration side of your business. So now, where essentially each of your rental properties is a separate business, once you establish a method for handling procedures, likely those will carry over in some form to each property, aka business. When developing your operating procedures for multiple properties, under each procedure, just add notes or a section for each property should there be something different or specific that they need to know. For instance, where are the secured files for these tenants kept? Where are the keys or the relevant codes to the property? And what's the banking information for that rental property? All of this information should be kept confidentially in an electronic file or a binder that's locked up, and at least one person needs to know how to access it. Why don't you talk about the criteria aspect for this question?
Okie doke. So, where operating procedures usually apply to the business as a whole and are specifically the step by step process you use to run and operate your business, your criteria are specific to each property. Criteria is your rules, so to speak. You should have them set for accepting and processing applications, to follow fair housing laws, so if you're challenged, you can show these written criteria to legal counsel, because that is the first thing they're going to ask for. These criteria are usually available to the public, where operating procedures should only be accessed by the owners and whomever they deem important enough to step in and take over should that be needed. So, when you are placing an ad for a vacancy, you can state your criteria there and then have a sheet available when you're doing unit showings. You can even attach it to the applicant welcome packet, or if you have a property website, have a link for the applicants to read your criteria on there. These applicant criteria should be something like this. Applicant must show net income meets or exceeds 3 times asking rent, has a FICO score of 700 or above, has 2 positive rental history references from previous landlords, and can submit the security deposit amount in full at the time of the lease signing. We process all applications on a first come, first qualified basis. We do not begin to process applications until all supporting documentation has been submitted. We reserve the right to accept another applicant that shows a stronger financial capability to rent from us, and we follow all fair housing laws and are an equal opportunity housing provider. Now, in your lease agreements, you also have criteria which should be listed on the ad, like if you don't allow smoking on property, or if you allow pets, and if there are any specifics regarding size, breed, or type of animal. Your criteria can also apply to utilities and who pays for what, and along those same lines, if you provide repairs for specific appliances like the washer and dryer or dishwasher, which are non-essential appliances. They can address parking and storage and use of grills. All of those things I just mentioned are specific to one property. They certainly can be replicated to be used on another similar property, but depending on the type of property and the location, your criteria may change. You may not provide a washer and a dryer or a dishwasher, or for single family homes, the tenant typically will cover all the utilities. We own a variety of types of property, And where many of our criteria are replicated and similar, we certainly have different criteria for each and every rental we own. So, what's the next question?
Okay, Denny from Iowa wants to know, how important is landlord software? I'm old school and I still receive checks in the mail. So, there's two sides to this question, Denny. Let's first start with the fact that not all properties are alike. We find that lower level rentals like C and D properties sometimes have tenants who have little financial know how. They may not have a checking account and prefer to only deal with cash or cashier's checks. In this case, they would not have a bank account to link for payment for landlords who use software to collect rents. You also have older tenants who may or may not use the internet, so software would be lost on them. The other side is the tenant experience and how convenient software makes it for them to pay rent, upload documents for rentals insurance, and put in requests for maintenance, pets, ESAs, etc. Most landlord software these days offers a tenant portal, which in turn makes a landlord management style appear more professional. So, again, depending on your market and class of tenants who are your clients, this can be a good thing. Most tenants don't like to contact the landlords directly for every little thing. Having software makes it seem like there's a go between, even though there really isn't. Some tenants like to get a cashier's check and have the landlord pick up the rent, or they'll drop it off, at which time they can communicate any issues to the landlord. And I kid you not, one eightplex that we manage here in the Bay Area, right in the heart of Silicon Valley, the manager would go on the first of the month to pick up the rent, often in cash from all the tenants.
Yeah, that manager was before the property transferred to the new owner and you took over. It took you what, a couple months to retrain those tenants to not wait around for someone to come pick up their rents?
Yeah. Since we have taken over the management, the tenants either send in a check or they actually go and drop it off to the property manager's office. And that building is a work in progress, but we're getting there.
Well, the new owners have other rental properties, so they have experience on how to handle things. They've gone in and done quite a few costly upgrades to the property, so the tenants should be pleased. All right, let me talk a little bit about landlord software. And I'll be honest, we have a couple of different softwares that we have dabbled with, but right now we use QuickBooks to invoice our tenants and text or email for requests. The rent is paid directly to our bank account, and those payments are pre coded, so they update our accounting records at the same time. Once it's all set up, it's really simple to use, and our CPA loves it because when tax time rolls around, he just logs into our system and pulls the numbers he needs. We'll be doing a podcast all about this in early 2024, but if you're looking into software, we recommend these. For newbies with only one or two units, check out TurboTenant. They are completely free, and the only time you pay is if you need to buy a lease or if you want your rents deposited faster than the regular 5-day turnaround. For those a bit more established and know what level of assistance they need, we love Hemlane. This is a software that grows with your portfolio. They charge a flat monthly fee of $28 plus a fee per unit depending on which plan you choose, with 3 categories to choose from. They've got the basic plan, which costs $2 per unit and gives you marketing for your ads in over 30 listing websites, application and tenant screening, lease tracking and management, financials and online rent payments, and a maintenance and repair submission where the tenant can track progress. Several of these are items that TurboTenant does for free, but let me finish so you can see where I'm going with this. Hemlane also has the Essential Plan, which costs $28 plus $12 per unit, which includes state-specific leases and repair coordination with a 24/7 support team. Lastly, they have the Complete Plan, which is $28 flat fee plus $32 per unit, and they will handle everything from repairs and maintenance to placing and moving out tenants for you. Everything a regular property manager would do for a much higher cost, typically at about $100 a unit per month. The best part about using Hemlane is that it grows with your portfolio. Whether you have 1 or 10 units, as your business scales, it can handle all you need from minimal assistance to taking over fully and completely without changes for your tenants to cope with. Because that's a hassle to tenants when landlords change their property management software or even actual property managers. There are new people to get to know, new contact information, and they usually have to change their rent payment info as well. So, no matter which software you choose, choose one that works best for you now, but will continue to work best for you as your rental property business grows. We will link both of these in the show notes for you to check out.
Yeah, and like Kevin said, Turbo Tenant is free, so it costs nothing to sign up and check them out. Hemlane offers a 14-day trial with no credit card, so you can go in and play around with it before you make a decision on it. All right, Denny, not sure we answered your question directly, but whether you choose to use landlord software or not depends on your business structure and where you see yourself going with it. It also depends on the kind of properties you own and the tenants you have in them, and to what extent you want support with those properties, if any. Okay, our next question is from Travis in Tennessee. And he asks, what would you say is the most important thing to know about being a landlord? Well, first off, there's not just one thing to know, there's a few. But if we have to pick one, it's your tenants. You have to place solid tenants. Do thorough background checks. Take your time to find the right tenant that will pay their rent and respect and care for your unit. Everything that has to do with rental properties falls back to the quality of tenant that you place in your unit. Because if you do not, the cost to get them out is extreme. There's a ton of stress that comes if they don't pay on time or if they have horrible lease violations. Now, without saying too much, we will be launching a course in 2024 that's going to walk landlords through the exact steps that we take to find our ideal tenant. And I think we're going to call it From Marketing to Move In. We have not had one eviction in nearly 20 years of managing. I'll say that our method is pretty solid. And second, know your landlord tenant laws and ordinances. This includes fair housing laws. We have a deal with the Fair Housing Institute where they're giving our listeners 15% off any course when you use the code YLR2023. We get nothing in return for the use of this code. It's purely a goodwill gesture. But they have a bunch of options to choose from. At the very least, if you're going to self-manage your properties, you should take the certification course to learn all the ins and outs about fair housing. We'll link all of this in the show notes for you. The third thing, do inspections every 6 months to make sure there's no violations and to check for any maintenance that needs to be completed. We have an inspection checklist that is very thorough and can be used for up to a 4-bedroom, 4-bath rental property. It includes every area of the home that you can imagine, even garages and basements and attics and exterior spaces. We sell it for $5, and we're going to link it in the show notes if you'd like to check it out. The last thing I want to say is that we did an episode all about inspections. So if you want to get details on how we handle things, I believe it's episode 4, and it's all about inspections. You need to check it out. We'll link that in the show notes. Okay, this last question is not so related to landlord duties as much as it is for those who may question about working with your spouse or partner in life. Jenny from New Jersey asks, is it hard to work with your spouse? You guys make it look so easy. Wow. First of all, as with anything in life, it's as hard as you make it, Jenny. Each of us have our own responsibilities, but I'll be honest, I'm a bit of a micromanager. And there's a lot of trust you need to have, and big decisions need to be made together. If one is not on board, then you need to pass. For instance, the last property we were buying, Kevin had several picked out that were out of state in areas where we knew no one. No boots on the ground, and we'd have to start from scratch. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I would have preferred to be near one of the kids so that when we visit them, we can conduct any business that needed to be done at the same time. And Kevin's pretty easygoing. Now, this is my second marriage, so it's much different for me. I have been through some pretty hard times and I've experienced a lot of loss, so my mindset is one where gratitude is super important. I know I'm blessed and I'm thankful for that daily. And part of those blessings is Kevin and how easygoing he is, because much of the time, I'm not so easygoing.
Okay. I feel like I'm being set up here. You said something nice about me, so thank you. Then you said you're not easygoing, so no matter what I say, I can get in trouble, right?
Be careful.
Okay. Listen, I'll admit Stacy pretty much runs things in the business we own and in our home life. But honestly, I don't mind Stacy taking the lead a lot of the time and am not threatened by it. Because while we don't always agree, we do respect each other and value each other's opinions. We work really long days much of the time. We run and operate our personal properties and property management business. We are very involved with our families and have some responsibilities there. And we are working to grow your landlord resource, which honestly is a bulk of our time. We love to travel. And so while we work really long days, many times it's to work ahead before a big trip coming up. So having something to look forward to when dealing with those long, tough days is huge too. The kids are older now, and all but one are moved out and living independently. As Stacy said, though, we have a close family and we do spend a lot of time traveling to visit them. So when we're home, we are usually working hard to prepare our content and get any maintenance on properties done and completed so we can enjoy our time away. This year alone, over a 4 month span, we were gone 63 days. I mean, not all at once, of course, but that means that all of our podcasts, social media content, newsletters, inspections, lease renewals, preventative maintenance, etc., all need to be completed before we leave. And same goes with the holidays. We love the holidays. It's one of our most favorite times of the year. So we work our butts off to complete everything so we can take 2 to 3 weeks off and have quality time with family and also with each other. Like Stacy said, we are truly blessed. We value our time together as often as we can because you just don't know what tomorrow brings. Date nights, weekends away, as well as me going to sporting events with the guys and her going for a girls' weekend now and then. Time away from each other is important as well, but this is what works for us.
We do work hard, sometimes 12 to 14-hour days, but that's our choice. One that I'm not always on board with, though. But the key for us is communication. It's so important to sit down and check in with each other and make sure that you're still on the same page, that your goals are aligned, and both of you are still happy doing whatever it is that you're doing. And the last thing I'll say is if you're hoping to run a rental property business with your spouse, figure out who has which strengths and let them run with it. If you both get to a point where it's too much, hire a property manager. You always have a choice. Okay, you guys, that's a wrap on our Q&A. Thank you so much to all of you who sent in questions. We may not have been able to get to all of them, but keep sending them in, and we'll do more of these in the coming months. As always, we thank you for taking time out of your busy day to listen to all we have to say. If you'd like to connect more with us, we have a private Facebook group and a free weekly newsletter that we put out. We'll link all the ways to connect with us in the show notes. So until next time, you've got this, landlords.